Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Hold My Drink, where we navigate the news and politics with a chaser of civility. I'm your host, Jen, inviting you to grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and imagine with us how to create a new American identity together. Welcome to this week's Hold My Drink. I am so excited. I have got W.F. Twyman Jr., who is a writer and attorney in San Diego, and James Twyman, who is the author of 16 books, including the best-selling The Moses Code. These two are cousins, both descended from George Twyman I, who came to America from Kent, England in the 1600s, a family tree that now crosses the racial spectrum. And we're connecting today, not as Black or white Twymans, but as family. And I cannot think of a better reunion as we come together to imagine a new American identity together. So before we get started, guys, you know what my first question is. What are you drinking? James, let me know.
I'll go first. Okay, so right now I'm finishing just a cup of water, but it's more the cup that's significant. This is a cup that my daughter painted when she was about 5 years old, I think. And I have had maybe 20,000 drinks out of this cup. I was thinking the other day, if my house was on fire, I'd probably grab one of my guitars and my cup. But I also have on reserve a wonderful ginger beer because I live in Ajijic, Mexico, and there's a friend of mine who has a company manufacturing this. So I have that waiting as soon as the water's done.
Good for you. Winkfield, what are you drinking?
Well, I'll tell you, and you can call me Wink, by the way.
Okay.
I am drinking, as a sign of affinity, ginger beer as well from our local Trader Joe's. And you'll notice it has a Y on it, an 88. That reflects the family tradition. My wife, Skylar, graduated from Yale in 1988, and my lovely daughter, Caroline, is a first-year student now at Yale as well. And she'll be home this afternoon. Yay!
Wow,
Looking forward to
great.
seeing her. Yes.
Oh, well, I'm drinking a Greyhound. So yes, that's how I'm starting out this conversation. So my first question is for you, Wink. You have long been in search of connection with your Twyman family, and that's the main thrust of your book, On the Road to Oak Lawn: Truth and Reconciliation and the Twymans. And so can you tell me why this is so important to you?
Well, I think curiosity comes to mind. I grew up until the age of 8 on Twyman Road, and everyone on Twyman Road was a Twyman. My uncle Will Ernest lived across the street. My uncle Robert Daniel lived down the road at the corner of Twyman Road and Rosenell Drive. Until the age of 8, I was surrounded by Twymans. That was my universe. And as I got older, I discovered that's unusual. Most people don't have a street named after their family. And so as I grew older, I always wanted to know, well, where did the name come from? And was I related to other Twymans? So it was curiosity at first, but then it morphed into something deeper because my lineage in my Twyman line back to Scott Twyman. And he was born a slave in 1848, but that's as far as I could go. So for over 50 years of my life, that was it, the end point. But like many orphans, I was orphaned before the year 1848. And I always felt the pull of something more in my past. And I think that pull led me to dig deeper and deeper until one glorious day on my birthday in 2016, I met a cousin, Deb Andrew from Louisville, Kentucky, and a whole new world of Twyman relations and cousins opened up. So that's kind of my story.
What about you, James? I mean, how about your search for the Twymans?
Well, first of all, oddly enough, my family, which at least my immediate family, came from Missouri, and in the town of Bevier, Missouri, where my father was raised, little tiny town, there was Twyman Corner, and all of the people who lived on that little area, they were all Twyman. It was really my brother and my cousin who really dove into the search, the genealogical search. And so they would feed me information uh, about George Twyman or George Washington and other things. And I was sort of on the sideline, like, this is interesting. I was enjoying what they were sharing with me. But I wasn't really drawn in until I think maybe my sister connected with you, Wink, on Facebook.
Okay.
I think that's how it happened, and so we began writing back and forth and began a dialogue, so for me, the really interesting thing is this cross-cultural dynamic. How,
Mm.
in this country we're so identified with with our ethnicity, our, whether we're black or white or Hispanic, but to know that in our own story with the Twymans, that we have all of that. There's the black side of the family, the white side of the family, but we're one family. And I think this is a message for our time.
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely. When did
if
you
I
find
can,
out? Oh, yeah, no, Wink, please jump
sure. I
in.
was going to say, I think James is so right. I think Twymans are uniquely blessed to kind of lead the way in terms of understanding across racial lines. I mean, there are only 4,000 of us in the country. I mean, we're all the remnants of this young, courageous teenager, George the First, who left all that he knew in 1677 and set foot on Middlesex County, Virginia. And from that sprung all of the Twymans, probably 90% of the Twymans in the US today. So I think that we're uniquely blessed because we share the same blood, the same family tree, right? And there are people who are family who may not look like us, but yet they share the same blood and the same genetic makeup. I think that's an important possibility we offer the rest of the country.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think what I so amazes me, Wink, about what you are doing is, and you got me started on this, is, I Wink was the one, James, who said to me, why don't, before we started writing together, why don't you find out and connect to your distant cousins who aren't your of a different race for you. And I thought that, and I have done that as well, but that connection, and to see that really created that humanity that I think a lot of times we're missing, particularly in this day and age with a lot of the racial conversations, at least in the United States, is we seem more divided than connected. But when you actually find out that your family is so much more diverse, it changes the game.
Really does. And so Wink and I have enjoyed playing with this and encouraging our own family members, my brothers and sisters, and I know with Wink and his children, encouraging them to that one-dimensional viewpoint of, well, we're white, we're black. Uh, I remember hearing one of the first stories that really inspired me was when I heard about another James Twyman who was a slave holder, and he brought all of his slaves, I believe it was up to Ohio, and he bought land along a river, and he freed all of his slaves and gave them each a parcel of land along this river. I thought, that right on. I mean, I'm so glad his name was James Twyman, because that's what
Right.
I would have done. I'm the radical of my family. I don't know if this is true of Wink or not, but no one in my family understands me because I'm the one that does everything different. But so that's what something radical that 150 years later people would be talking about.
Yeah,
I,
I want to agree with that. I think in some ways I am like the Galileo of my family, in the sense that I see, as Galileo did in the 1600s, he saw that dogma was not true, that the earth did move around, opposed to the dogma of the Catholic Church at the time. I think in some ways I recognize deeply and appreciate profoundly how I am the mixture of many different people, many different names. A part of me may hail from West Africa, a part may hail from England, a part may hail from France or Sweden. And I just think that so changes your sense of self. And I think that so expands your sense of connection with other people. And I think sometimes in my family, I'm kind of seen like a modern day Galileo. That doesn't seem to be the way we've always thought about family and race. Where's Wink coming from? So they don't like say you're going to be under house arrest for 20 years because you do this. But I think there is the idea that I'm kind of seeking beyond the normal sense of what race and family means and looks like. In fact, James, that reminds me of something, actually. There are these two tensions out there I find in life. There's this desire to be an individual, which we can all appreciate because we uniquely manifest good in the universe. But there's also this tension of connection, this sense that we all are connected to each other. How do you reconcile individualism and connection? Does the Moses Code perhaps offer some insights into reconciling those two things?
Well, I would say ultimately, and I was thinking about this as you were speaking, to recognize that we're not just, well, in one way, we're not just one thing, and in another way, we are just one thing. We tend to isolate ourselves and pigeonhole ourselves and say, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm white, I'm black, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm gay, I'm straight. And we say, this is who I am. But the truth is, when the more we limit ourselves in that way, that the more we are unable to realize and to see that we're all of that. And I think this is really the gift that we're bringing, showing that there are many aspects of the Twyman lineage and the Twyman experience that we can relate to one another. There are still places in our country where blacks and whites don't relate at all. And there's still, as we are seeing currently, that there are still people who have these deep racist veins that they may not even recognize. And the truth is, we all have that. I for example, sometimes out of nowhere, this thought will come into my mind, and I'll look at it and say, that was racist. I mean, I'm not a racist person, but there's this collective consciousness. And we're seeing that revealed right now. This is the reason, time that we're living, but it's also the very promising time because it's all coming to the surface. And we can see that not only are we different, but we're the same. And yes, we're individuals with an individual experience, but there's this collective experience as the Twymans or as just people, as Americans. I think that this is a wonderful challenge to our country and to the whole world to see things in a more open way.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I think this search for ancestry is one of the ways to do that. Again, it's one thing to say, I'm not racist, I want to find connection, but when you actually find that connection, like you are blood, I think that helps, even though we should be finding that connection. We don't have to be blood, but it just makes, I don't know, it kind of greases the wheels, I feel, to show us that really we all are, while individuals, as Wink said, we all are one and the same. And I would find it, there are probably less people who do not have a mixed lineage than there are those who are just purely one lineage, but we just don't spend that time to find it. So that journey for us has been so eye-opening to connect to our cousins who think differently, had different histories, to learn from those histories, and yet to see how we're alike. And I'm laughing at the start that you guys both, you don't really know each other, but what drink did you both bring to the table? I'm ginger beer, really? Talk about affinity.
It's all genetic. It's all
it's all in the genes.
I guess like ginger beer, I guess.
Yeah. I guess with my greyhound, I'm not a Twyman, but
Right. Well, Jen, they say the most powerful word for any is their name. And I told you and Jimmy this earlier. My grandfather was named James Twyman. My favorite uncle was named James Twyman. I think sometimes you say, what is it? Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous.
Yeah.
Maybe these coincidences have some higher purpose.
Absolutely.
Maybe. Who knows?
Oh, I think so. And The fact that we're just here right now having this discussion, and whoever's listening to this discussion, they're probably thinking the same thing. Who do I have in my family? Is my family more diverse than we expected? So it expands. So on one hand, it's like, okay, James Twyman, yeah, I like that word. I like those words. But at the same time, I realize I'm not James Twyman. There's no such thing as a James Twyman. I'm, in a spiritual sense,
Mm.
I'm all of this. And so it's like breathing in and out, the in breath, the out breath. We're identified, we're everything. We're identified, we're all that is. And so it's like a dance. And so I'm really enjoying this dance of rediscovering my own lineage through a part of the family uh, that I'm really enjoying. Uh, I remember when I was, because I'm a musician, if you couldn't tell, and
Yeah, right, right.
I used to be in a soul band, and people used to come up to me afterwards and say, "Dude, there is like a 250-pound black man inside you." And
Yeah. Little did they
that was
know.
the highest compliment. Thank you. Thank you.
That's funny. That's funny.
Well, I think that Wink might be able to relate to that because sometimes, Wink, correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes your family say that you're not black.
Oh, sure, sure, of course. Caroline has said that sometimes. But you know what it is? What it is I think we create these ways of thinking, and we associate them to ways of being in the world. And I know from personal experience that's hooey. Um, if there are over 45 million Black Americans, there are over 45 million Black American life stories, experiences, and perspectives. There's only one Wink Twyman. There are only a few Twymans who knew the sense of self of growing up on Twyman Road, where everyone's a Twyman. There are only some cousins who benefited from the legacy of our great great grandfather, Daniel Brown. God bless his soul. There are only some Black Americans who've only known suburbia, who've only known cow pastures in their backyard, fishing for catfish in the pond in the cow pasture, watching neighbors chase snakes with rakes in a very country way when you came home from school. I mean, those are unique experiences. They're not the typical, typical Black experience. I wish I could get on a mountaintop and say it loud and clear. First and foremost, we are self, right? We are who we are as individuals. And then we have these other layers of characteristics and assumptions and caricatures and stereotypes that people place on us. And that's so sad. Like if I walk down the street in San Diego, one can see that I'm a Black guy, but do you see that I'm an introvert, that I'm an intellectual? Do you see a Star Trek lover
Hey,
or
there's something else
excellence,
I was
right?
saying
Jen
then.
knows, Jen knows. I mean, you don't see those things. That's such the beauty. That's the raw power of getting to know people. When you know people more and more, all the caricatures and stereotypes melt away, and you begin to train your eyes to see the inner self, not the external manifestation with all these drapings of caricatures and whatever. So I think it's one of the joys of my life. I was so fortunate to have grown up in a suburb where I had to learn to deal with all kinds of people. Because as I became an adult, I recognized what's really important is the person inside, not the book covering. And I just think that's a better way to be in the world. What do you think, Jimmy?
I've been very blessed to have the opportunity to travel around the world, often to countries that are very different from our experience, and even at times considered to be enemies. For example, in 1998, I was invited to come to Iraq by Saddam Hussein to perform a peace concert at the same time that we were on the verge of another war. And it was one of the first times I had an opportunity to do that. And of course, I'm going in thinking these people are very different. I'm wondering how they're going to receive me. Are they going to like me? Are they going to
Mm.
attack me? And when I got to Baghdad, fact, I'll tell you a funny story. In order to get to Baghdad at that time, we had to fly into Amman, Jordan, and then take a 12-hour taxi drive through the desert to get to Baghdad because there was a no-fly zone. And the first step onto Iraqi soil was coming out of the taxi at a hotel that we were going to be put up in called the El Rashid Hotel. And we step out, and there at the entrance on the ground is a beautiful mosaic. And in the mosaic, there is a face, and with a really a very angry snarl on his face. And I'm looking at it thinking, that looks a lot like George Bush, senior, of course. And I step back and I see, and it says at the bottom in the mosaic, Bush is a criminal. You literally have to walk on George Bush's face to get into this hotel. So I'm thinking, oh my goodness, these people, how are they going to respond to me? This American peace troubadour. And what I found, and what I have always found, is that we're really all the same. The differences about our nationality or ethnicity or whatever it may be. We realize that we're deep down the same. We want the same things for our families, for ourselves. I remember after this concert that I did, they had a party for me, and we just sat around singing Simon and Garfunkel songs all night long. So what we're doing here is we're focusing on the ways that we're the same rather than the ways that we're different. And I think, especially in our national story right now, this is a very important lesson because we're being ripped apart by our differences when we could be coming together and really be the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more.
And I would tell you, Jimmy, I love that story because the reason that I'm on this mission, it started for me very, very young, where my father he was the Air Force attaché in Burma. It was called Burma then. It was called Myanmar. And I was taken out of Ohio. I was living in Ohio. My father was at Wright Pat Air Force Base in Ohio. So you can imagine the culture shock of going to Burma, which at that time was a totalitarian military junta regime. Hardly foreigners came in to visit. And all of a sudden, I'm connecting with people who were so different from me, and yet they were so the same. The kids my age all wanted just to have fun. They wanted to be able to go to school. They wanted to, and the parents, and that was my watershed moment in my life for connecting with people. And it was really when I started to see, and looking at the United States from the outside in, I had this love of our country because I saw it as a multicultural Mecca. How fun is it that we have so many people from around the world, and just and our freedoms and whatnot. And so that was where also my love for America came from. And it was about, a couple of years ago where I saw that just tearing apart, that I took all those experiences that I had living overseas and loving people across so many differences, that I was like, I can't allow our country to go this way. So doing whatever I could to make these connections, like between you guys today, to see that we've got a lot in common, more so than what we have different, and more so than what we see is tearing us apart. That makes me just so incredibly sad. Yeah. What are the things No, go ahead, Wink.
Oh, well, I think that the people who share that vision that you have, that we have to step up perhaps more, have to be more courageous. I mean, it's easy to always go with the herd, to follow the crowd. I think it takes a little bit more fortitude or a sense of self to have a vision of a better way and to pursue that, even though you may not get confirmation or affirmation from your immediate friends or associates. In the long run, it is the sense of self that prevails. I mean, I've always thought that in 500 years hence, we remember people who simply followed the crowd, or do we remember those who saw things differently and made a difference? We remember those who saw things differently over the long run and made a difference, like Galileo, for example, or even our founding fathers. I am always I always feel a sense of gratitude to have grown up in a state, so many men of giant vision: George Washington, Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe. I mean, a chill almost goes up your back. In this one little state, Virginia, our home, James, our ancestral home,
Right.
we produce such titans of vision, not just for American history, but for global history. And so, I don't know. I just feel like there should be more of a sense of blessing as opposed to resentment and grudges
And
sometimes.
the fact that the Twyman influence and line is woven right into that. George Washington is a member of our family. I think we're second cousins 7 times removed, something
That's
like.
right.
Mhm.
That's right.
And there were Twymans who lived like right down the street from Thomas Jefferson.
George
And
Twyman III was a pen pal of Thomas
that's
Jefferson.
right. Their letters about
Right.
gardening.
Something like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful from our Twyman perspective to know that we're somehow woven into that great revolutionary spirit, and to know that these titans, as you called them, and they truly were, they saw things differently,
Right.
and we're still trying to live up to their vision even today, maybe especially today.
Hmm.
We're still trying to realize that we are created equal, and that we really, are imbued with indelible rights. This is the great challenge, and being able to see how we are the same. It doesn't matter that you're black and that I'm white. We're family, and that's true of all of us. We're all family, and if we could just get over ourselves
Here,
and see.
here. Shout out to Caroline Twyman.
We'll make sure she hears our podcast. Well, let me ask you guys this. This is a big question. So, searching for our histories, as you guys have clearly done, I feel like that is a possible, and I've mentioned this before, but it's a possible solution to finding that reconciliation and that affinity that I feel that is lacking today versus the contrived affinity that is now being applied in diversity training, in some of the conversations about racial reconciliation that I feel are being more divisive. What would your two suggestions be for creating this authentic affinity across races, focusing on our humanity and doing it better than we've been doing it in the past couple years, which I believe has been more destructive than it has been constructive? What advice would both of you give?
I'd love to
well,
hear what you think, Wink.
well, I'll take a stab at that. What I think two steps. One, I think that when something seems to smell of caricature or stereotypes, you should kind of keep your distance from that. You should not accept that because oftentimes caricatures and stereotypes can be molded and shaped into slogans. And slogans can simply manipulate people and they take us away from the truth, from the authentic core of who we are as individuals. Um, Number two, and I think this is a generational thing, I think that growing up in the 1970s in Virginia, I have a different conception of affinity and race than people may have who grew up in the 2000s. It was always a given when I was growing up that the good society was when divisions would melt away. And that seems to have changed. It seems to be that some people believe the good society is when you build and build and build upon divisions. I just kind of reject that. And so maybe the second point would be people of my generation, grandparents, people who remember a better way of race should be more assertive and expressive through essays or articles or lectures or podcasts, whatever, because there is a truth out there that we have lived in a different time, and I would argue even a better time. And I think that's another way we can get to that place, Jen. As I conclude, I remember what was it? Spock once said to the Romulan commander, something like, is it a lie not to tell the truth? I think sometimes we forget the entire truth of our history. We only share parts of the truth that support narratives. And that's really probably not fully truthful, as Spock would have said.
Hmm.
I knew you
Yeah.
had to bring Spock in at some point.
I had to, right?
Well, Jimmy, why don't you
Well,
take us home with your thoughts and
yeah.
what do you think? I
The
mean, you
things
wrote
that
Morse
I'm,
code.
yeah. Wink, you stirred something in me. It's pretty clear that there are a lot of people today who have chosen to gain power through the manipulation of fear.
Mm,
They become more powerful the more fearful they make us, because when we are afraid, we push away from each other, and and then we mobilize and crystallize around a particular slogan or idea, which may or may not have any reality at all. I mean, we look out. Sometimes I look at people who have very different, even in my own family, who have very different opinions or ideas about things, and I say, how can you possibly think that? I mean, to me, that is so illogical. But that's the reason, because when we're fearful, we crystallize
mm,
around a concept, and then we gather support. Will only be around people who agree with us. And that's very dangerous, just only having people around you that agree with you, as opposed to having more and more people come along, like this podcast, where we're experiencing the unification through love.
Yeah.
So there's the manipulation through fear, but now we're being unified in love and connection and understanding, breaking down those barriers that for some people would be absolute. Like, you're black, I'm white, we're not the same.
sure.
We are. We are the same. In our skin color, our racial background has nothing to do with how connected we are in essential ways. And in this discussion, we're just using the fact that we're both Twymans to illustrate a much bigger and a more important experience, that we're all here for the same reason. We're all people. We're all human beings. We all have the same desires, the same wishes for our family, for our country. And if we can mobilize around that unifying field of love rather than the manipulation of fear, I
Right.
think we're going to move past this very difficult time quickly, I hope.
And our countrymen need to hear that. I mean, one of my dreams is one day, I may not live to see it, but one day, uh, all of the living descendants of George Twyman the First will walk arm in arm on the road to Oak Lawn, and that all color divisions will melt away on that day. So,
Well, I'd love to
my
visit
dream.
Oman.
There you. That's right. That's
It'll
right.
begin with the two of us.
That's right. I like
Absolutely.
that. You're on. That's a deal.
And I think, just to wrap this up, I'm almost done with my drink. One of the things that I'm getting from you guys is this quote that I love so much, and I use it a lot, but I think that it's really relevant here. I think Ram Dass, it's his quote, and it's, "We're all just here to walk each other home."
Mm.
And the image that I love of that quote, it's got Buddha and a Hindu god, Shiva, and you've got Jesus, and they're all got their arms around each other,
Hmm.
and it's we're just all here to walk each other home. And when we realize that, you know, I mean, I think that in and of itself is such a unifying
Yes.
idea. And you're absolutely right, James. I feel that um, when we focus on fear versus that love, that's where the divisions, and we're manipulated by the fear to create the more divisions. And getting beyond that, that's the hard part. Maybe we
Live
just
the
all need to
love.
find out. Yeah, well, we just need to all find out that we're family,
That's right. That's right. That's right.
like you guys have, as a possible solution.
Amen.
Well, thank you so much, you two, for joining us. This is a amazing family reunion. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your family
Oh,
reunion.
thank you, Jen, for allowing us to share the
Yeah.
love.
Next time I'm bringing a ginger beer so that I can be a better interloper.
There you go. Ginger beer.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Hold My Drink. Like or subscribe to the show and check out the show notes for links to source material and to our website where you can find what each of us is reading every week, different news with different views. If you have a topic that you would like us to explore, drop us a line. And join us next week as we say, hold my drink, and the conversation gets real.